Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Last week, we were singing the praises of my Boston Celtics, Sap, talking about how fantastic they've played and how they're really gearing up for a deep run in the playoffs. And we specifically highlighted their defense and the play of Rob Williams and how he was the key to the defense. And then on cue, Sap, about a day later, Rob Williams goes down with a meniscus tear, and he's going to be out about 4 to 6 weeks, which puts him in line for about the second round of the playoffs. Did we curse Rob Williams, Sep?
Probably, but we couched it right by saying, fingers crossed that he remains healthy, because he's never really been a durable guy throughout his career. This is the most durable he's been. Again, we're talking about a big athletic guy who plays with a lot of torque, a lot of force, and the more you go up, the more you go down, the more you go up, the more you go down, you're going to be susceptible to injuries. And that's what happened. Now they went in, they clipped the meniscus, and we heard 4 to 6 weeks, which I never believe when it comes from the Celtics, because they've had a long history of saying, yeah, so-and-so's coming back, and then the player never comes back, whether it's Kevin Garnett or Shaq or Kemba Walker, whoever. They always seem to, be more optimistic than being realistic.
That's a good point. Yep.
Yeah, then you got Woj tweeting out that the 4 to 6 weeks may actually be conservative, and he may be back even sooner. Now, the season ends a week from Sunday. They're not going to have to play in that play-in tournament, so they get a little break there. The earliest the second round could start, I believe, is April 28th. So if he can come back around that time, you could get him for that second round. Now it's a matter of seeing who you play in the first round, whether you're playing Toronto or, if you get up to the 2 or the 1 seed, maybe you're playing Brooklyn. So that's going to be worked out at the end of the regular season to see how the teams get seeded and then what happens in the play-in tournament. But I think he maybe avoided a scare, but I just hope it's not a quick fix for Rob Williams and that this flares up again, because that is always something that's in the back of your mind.
Yeah, I mean, you did say, and we've been saying all season long, that he's not the most durable guy, and I think you raise a good point because of the style of his game, because of how athletic he is. He's launching, and so there's bound to be some knee injuries. That's sort of our concern with Ja Morant. We talked about, weeks ago how much we love Ja Morant. Everybody does, but that's the concern with these uber athletes, is that sometimes the knee will break down on you because you're putting so much pressure on it. And that's what happened to Rob Williams. Now it seems like they are fortunate, and he's fortunate, that they avoided a catastrophic injury, like an ACL, MCL tear, or something that takes 12 months to recover from. So even if Rob isn't able to come back for this postseason, and obviously the Celtics and myself are crossing our fingers that he does, because it completely changes their outlook. At least at the bare minimum, he should be totally fine for the start of next season. So it doesn't look like it's going to be an injury that impacts him for an extended period of time, which, that's the kiss of death if that sort of happens there. But it's like a comical, Sap, that we were literally one day talking about how much the team is revitalized because of Rob Williams and how their defense is, really structured around funneling the other team to Rob Williams. And then the next day he goes down. And this is not a new trend for the Celtics, Sap, who have gone like 6 or 7 postseasons in a row, entering the postseason missing a key player, a starter. It's like a curse, honestly, for a team that has a leprechaun as their logo. They have some awful luck.
Yeah, Jaylen Brown last year, the year before in the bubble, Kemba Walker was kind of in and out. Gordon Hayward was kind of in and out. We remember in Kyrie's first season here, he got injured in March and never returned. Always something with the Celtics, without question. And this is a big blow, but I think they should be able to at least get through that first round, depending on who they play and where they play those games. I know we'll touch on that a bit later about the potential series against the Toronto Raptors and what impact the mandate would have on the Celtics, but that's going to be the big thing. If they can get through that first round and he's back by the end of April, then they'll be closer to being whole. But again, he's going to have to get his conditioning up, and he's going to have to be confident on that knee, because when you go in and get scoped like that, the recovery is never as easy as it appears. And then also the confidence factor is a big thing, especially for a big man like that who's so athletic. I mean, this isn't, if you're watching Jokic or Luca, you can see those guys. They're never going to have these types of breakdowns because they're not uber athletic. They kind of float along at their own pace. Well,
Right.
Rob Williams is a player who plays with a lot of force, among the league leaders in block shots and offensive rebounds, and a dynamite defensive player, very underrated offensive player. So you're always concerned when a player who's that big and that athletic, big guys don't tend to get healthier as their career goes longer.
Very true. They don't. They often break down, and a lot of times you see it. It's a knee, it's a foot. Is typically the two things that really seem to bother those big guys. And yeah, they linger. So you hope that this isn't one that lingers, but Sap, in talking about and transitioning to talk about the Celtics and what they look like in the playoffs, a available and healthy Rob Williams versus a not available Rob Williams completely, in my mind, changes what their ultimate outlook could be. In the first round, I agree with what you're saying in that, they could certainly get out of the first round without him, depending on their opponent. As of today, they would be the 3 seed, and Toronto would be their first round opponent, as they would be the 6 seed. It's still so damn close in the Eastern Conference, Sap, that the Celtics, with I believe 5 games remaining, could still face, could still be either the 1 seed, or they could fall all the way down to the 5 seed. There's really not a whole lot of separation there. They're right now they're 47-30. The team ahead of them, Milwaukee, is 48-28. The team right below them, Philadelphia, is 46-30. So just a half game behind them. Chicago's 45-32. So you can't really prognosticate who their playoff opponent is going to be, other than they are not going to have to play in the play-in, because the East, as we've talked about for about 2 months now, remains just razor thin in terms of the margin. So we'll have to see but all we could do, Sap, is take it what it is today, which, like I said, would be they're the 3 seed and Toronto's the 6 seed. We'll talk about the vaccination and Canada stuff in 1 second, but if that is the matchup, the Celtics certainly can beat Toronto without Rob Williams. If that's their opponent in the first round, which again, that's all we can do is speculate right now. If that's their opponent in the first round, they're fully capable of being able and would be expected to beat Toronto without Rob Williams.
Yeah, because they'd have home court advantage. They went up earlier in the week without Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Al Horford, and Rob Williams, 4/5 of their starters, and lost in overtime to Toronto. Now, Pascal Siakam had 40 points that night, most of them coming within 6 feet of the basket. If you have Rob Williams, he's not going to be able to do that against the Celtics. So either way, Williams will not be available for that first series. But I think it's a bigger concern about what the Celtics will be able to bring to Toronto if they play the Raptors in that first round.
Yeah, so this has come up now as a story in the past week, basically because the Celtics didn't bring most of their team to Toronto. Like, seriously, I mean, I follow this team religiously, and I was like scratching my head and squinting my eyes at some of the guys that were on the bench and on the court. I was like, really? I have no idea who this person is. So that led to speculation with, okay, you can't travel to Canada right now if you're unvaccinated. That's a law that they have in Canada. And so there was a lot of speculation with, okay, well, the Celtics didn't travel with a lot of these guys. It was the second night of a back-to-back. There were some weird explanations for the absence of them. Like, Al Horford, it was personal reasons. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, it was some made-up injury. And so that led to, I believe it was Brian Windhorst, Sap, who said that the Celtics may have some issues with vaccinations, as do the 76ers, the two very probable opponents of the Toronto Raptors, which would obviously put into flux the entire series if some of these guys can't play. As far as the Celtics vaccinations go, the team, and even I saw this today, Brad Stevens was on Toucher and Rich, which was on the local radio here in Boston. The team won't comment on it. He won't comment on it. And the players won't comment on it. So they're not going to say. Jason Tatum has been on record saying he's vaccinated, so take that for whatever it's worth. Al Horford was asked about this the other night, and he didn't say if he was vaccinated or not, but he said he understands and that he'd be available to play in Toronto should they play Toronto. Whether that means he's vaccinated or would get vaccinated, your guess is as good as mine. The player that seems to really be in question here is Jaylen Brown. There seems to be conflicting reports where he alluded to the fact he's been vaccinated, but he hasn't confirmed it. He's alluded to supporting people who aren't vaccinated. I don't know. I think that's the fact that they won't comment on it and someone won't confirm it seems to strongly indicate that they're not vaccinated.
Yeah, I mean, when Windhorst reached out to Miami and Milwaukee, they said everyone's vaccinated. So they put any kind of rumors to rest. The Celtics and the 76ers said no comment, which would lead you to believe there are some players not vaccinated. Now, Chris Mannix, who covers this league and this team, pretty thoroughly, was on, I believe, Canadian television the other night, and he's under the impression that Horford and Brown are not vaccinated. Smart's definitely vaccinated because he played in Toronto. Tatum is supposedly vaccinated. But from what Chris Mannix was saying, that Brown and Horford may not be vaccinated. Now, you can get the vaccine if you get the one-shot Johnson & Johnson. I don't even know if that's still available. If not, you get the Pfizer or the Moderna, and then there's a second shot involved. I mean, if you get the first shot, is that now considered vaccinated? I don't know. I don't know what the laws are in Canada. Obviously, they'd be a little relaxed in New York City, which has allowed Kyrie Irving to play the home games as well as the road games. But this could be obviously a problem, for Philadelphia or the Celtics, whoever plays Toronto. So, you're probably hoping that you don't match up with them so it doesn't have to rear its ugly head and let Philadelphia play them. Or if Toronto falls back to the 7 seed and has to go through the play-in, and maybe they got to deal with Brooklyn in a game, and then we know Kyrie's not vaccinated. So, this is going to be part of the story in the play-in and in the postseason, something that the NFL was pretty good at avoiding. Now, whether they just hushed everything or they just, I believe, just stopped testing.
That's what they did. They stopped testing.
They would just stop testing. It's like, okay, we're going to the playoffs. We're not going to deal with this anymore. And they plowed through it. I don't know what's going to happen with the NBA because now we're dealing with a different country.
And no one's with a completely different government. So.
Right. Canada's not going to be pushed around. If anything, they'll hold stronger. And that's going to be a concern for the Celtics going forward. If you're a Celtics fan, you hope they're either vaccinated or you don't face them. Those are the two best options.
Sure. And as a Celtics fan and a Kyrie hater, I've been obviously incredibly vocal about how dumb I think he is and selfish I think he is. And, there's a slight difference because I think Kyrie has been extremely vocal about not getting vaccinated. And I think that using his platform to essentially promote not getting vaccinated, I think is about the worst thing you can do. But if Jaylen Brown or Al Horford or whoever isn't vaccinated on the Celtics, it's only fair and right that I criticize them too and would be incredibly disappointed. Now, I don't think it's as bad as promoting not getting vaccinated like Kyrie, but it's still really bad and selfish. And if you do play Toronto, which is, again, if the season ended today, who you would play, then you're putting your team at a massive disadvantage. And I look at it as a big FU to the fans, who've paid their hard-earned money and waste their time watching a team that isn't willing to fully compete. I think that it's incredibly disrespectful to the fans. And it's obviously, we've talked about this before, Sap. We think it's a huge detriment to society to not get vaccinated. So I can't say definitively if they are or aren't because they won't confirm it. But if Jaylen Brown isn't vaccinated, it would really change my perception of who Jaylen Brown is. And, we've talked a lot about how much we like his personality and how he's, somebody who's vocal and willing to stand up for what he believes in and is a really smart guy on and off the court. But this would completely, like Will Smith slapping Chris Rock in the face, it would completely change my perception of the person.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, your perception of the person changed very quickly on Oscar night. And you would think that Jaylen Brown would have been on board with this or spoken out about it. And he's kind of skirted the issue. So, yeah, we're going to find out soon enough if they play Toronto. I mean, probably in the perfect world for the NBA, Toronto falls and has to play in the play-in tournament, doesn't even get a home game and loses quickly, and that doesn't have to be dealt with. But that's such a well-coached, well-constructed team. I wouldn't bet against them.
Right now they're 2.5 games up over Cleveland with about 5 left to play. So yeah, they probably are going to end up as the 6 seed, Sap, 6 or 5 seed.
Yeah, so they're going to be in there. They're not going to have to be in the play-in. Meanwhile, Brooklyn's kind of fallen a little bit. They may actually have to play in the 9-10 matchup, which, doesn't give you an opportunity to lose. If you lose that first game, you're gone.
Yeah.
So that could happen for Brooklyn. I mean, same thing out west with the Lakers, who are just, I don't know how they're going to get in, but they may, but they would be part of the 9-10 combination. So they have to win 2 games in the play-in to even get into the postseason. So yeah, a lot of things still to be determined over the final 9 days of the regular season. And then we'll go from there in the play-in tournament. But yeah, this will come to light because you can't say, well, by the way, with Jaylen Brown and Al Horford are not going to travel to Toronto with us because, one has a bad knee and one has personal reasons. I mean, we're not stupid. We could kind of read that they're not vaccinated.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And so if obviously that changes the complexion of that series. So it's too hard to sort of speculate it now because you're speculating on 1, who the opponent's going to be, 2, if those players are or are not vaccinated. So there's too many scenarios right now to say definitively, okay, the Celtics would win or lose that series. Let's just, if I'm going off the assumption that everybody can play in Toronto and they should be able to beat Toronto without Rob Williams, the second round obviously is where it gets really dicey for the Celtics if you don't have Rob Williams, right? I don't know of those teams, unless there's a major upset. I don't know of Milwaukee, Miami, Philadelphia, if you could beat any of those teams.
No, I think it would be difficult. First of all, Milwaukee, you'd have to deal with Giannis. Good luck with that. If you're playing Philadelphia, you have to deal with Embiid. Now, Horford's been able to play Embiid, pretty well over the years, but let's face facts. Horford's getting older. Embiid is right in his prime. And if you're looking at Miami, Bam Adebayo is a tough matchup with or without Rob Williams. So, yeah, those 3 teams would present major problems in round 2 if you don't have Rob Williams. Kind of ironically, the team you'd want to face in the second round. And again, we still don't know how this is all going to play out with seedings. Brooklyn would probably be an easier matchup than those 3 teams because as great as Kevin Durant is and Kyrie Irving is, Rob Williams, look, you want him in the series against anyone. You can kind of make do without him against Brooklyn because those guys score more from the perimeter. They're not really low post players. So that might be the easiest of the matchups. But yeah, Milwaukee, Miami, and Philadelphia would all cause major problems without Rob Williams in the second round.
Yeah, so it changes the length of his injury completely changes the complexion of if the Celtics could go deep and get to the Eastern Conference Finals or even win the Eastern Conference. If they have him, they certainly have a chance. If they don't have a chance. I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, he's that important. I mean, you would hope that you could plow through with the players you have. Now, you can have a debate whether he's the 3rd or 4th best player on the team. I think he's such a unique player. That's what makes him
that's it, Sap, and it's because the East is so competitive this year. So it's that, even if it's an injury to your 3rd or 4th best player, you need to be at full strength to be able to get out of this. The healthiest team of these top contending East teams is probably going to be the team that gets out of the playoffs, right?
Yeah. I mean, look at Brooklyn last year. They played with Durant. Harden was injured early in the second round of that series, and Kyrie got hurt midway through. So they basically played with Durant, Kyrie for a few games, and a hobble James Harden. That wasn't enough to beat Milwaukee. Now, if you had both of those guys healthy, probably you beat Milwaukee. But yeah, no, it's going to come down to the health of these players because it's so even in the Eastern Conference. I mean, look, the top 4 seeds, you can throw a blanket over them. If Rob Williams is playing, the Celtics can compete with Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Miami, Brooklyn. Absolutely. They can play with any of those teams and beat any of those teams. Without Rob Williams, much, much tougher route.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that we did a whole show, Sap, last week on how important Rob Williams is to this team, not knowing he was going to get injured. But it almost works perfectly. Go back and listen to that show and you can see exactly what the Celtics are missing when they don't have Rob Williams in the lineup. You saw it last night the other night against Miami. So, that's the unfortunate news for the Celtics. The fortunate news for them is that it seems like the surgery went really well. But like you did say, Sap, it's not like the Celtics medical staff has been Nostradamus on their prognostications here. So you have to take anything with a grain of salt, without a doubt.
Yeah, and he's a young player. You've got a bright future with him. And anytime you go in and do things to the knee, it can take longer than anticipated.
Right. So it's switching gears here. We were just talking about the Eastern Conference, and 2 of the top teams, Philadelphia and Milwaukee, have 2 of the top MVP contenders. The other team is out west, Nikola Jokic on the Denver Nuggets, another one of the top MVP contenders. The latest straw poll that the league conducted had Nikola Jokic as the MVP frontrunner, which was different from the week before, which was Joel Embiid. But last week, when you and I talked about it, we both said Giannis is the most deserving. And what's Giannis done since we said that? He's beaten Brooklyn and Philadelphia, two of the top teams in the East, and had fantastic games against them. Against Embiid, he had the game-winning block on Embiid, I believe, had 40 points in that game, had 40 points against the Nets the other night. I think, honestly, if anybody who can vote in the MVP has cast their ballot already, they should not be allowed to vote ever again. This thing might come down to the last game of the season.
Oh, without question. I think the three are pretty even. Although, to be honest with you, I think it's Giannis's MVP to lose, although it appears that Jokic is the favorite right now. Look, what Giannis did just last week shows what a most valuable player does. He nearly outscored Kyrie and Durant by himself in that matchup against Brooklyn. He's hitting a game-tying three. He's blocking shots. He's rebounding. I mean, he's putting up ridiculous numbers on a consistent basis. It's like every night is 34, 14, and 7. And oh, by the way, he may be the best defensive player in the league. He's the best player in the league, I think, by a solid stretch. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to be the MVP every year. That's not necessarily the case. But he's a much better defender than Jokic. I think he's a better defender than Embiid. He scores as much, if not more, than those guys. He rebounds as much as Embiid and just a little below Jokic, and he can pass. He's a better passer than Embiid. Maybe doesn't get as many assists as Jokic, but the difference is on the defensive end, and he's got his team fighting for the number one seed in the East. Denver's 5-6 seed out west. That's good, but that's not really MVP worthy. I think it's Giannis's award. I don't even know what the big discussion is, other than the fact that for some reason people don't embrace this guy. And I was telling you earlier, JJ Redick has a really good podcast. He had Joel Embiid on, and he said, Joel, you're one of the three best players in the world. There's you, there's Jokic, and there's Kevin Durant. And Embiid even said, well, what about Giannis? And JJ Redick said, well, he's a level below. I'm like, what are we all watching here? Like, what does Giannis not do that doesn't make him the best player in basketball? I mean, I've seen two guys in all the years that I've watched basketball who have won a scoring title while they've also been maybe the best defensive player in the league at that time, Michael Jordan and LeBron James. You can make a case that Giannis, if he wins a scoring title this year, is also the best defensive player in the league. I don't know what more the guy has to do, but I kind of think, Jet, with Giannis, it's because he didn't come through AAU. He came from Greece. He didn't even come through the European system like Jokic or Luka,
Right.
And he played at Kansas, so he has that kind of American connection. I just think people look at Giannis and go, I think the players kind of look at him like he's not one of them. Because
remember what Harden said a few years ago when they were in the MVP race, and he said, he only runs and dunks.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
I mean,
that's not wrong with that. Yeah.
No, yeah, but that's just it's so ignorant of what he does. I saw this StatMuse, which is a really good Twitter account to follow because they tweet out all sorts of great NBA stats and stuff like that. Since Harden said that about that he only runs and dunks, he doesn't have much skill. Giannis has won a championship, a Finals MVP, an MVP, a Defensive Player of the Year, 3 All-Stars, 3 first-team NBA, 3 first-team All-Defense, All-Star Game MVP, a 50-point game in the final, closing game of the finals, and and this year he might win MVP and Defensive Player of the Year again.
Yeah, I don't know what more. He's the best player in the world. I mean, and look, that's tough for me to say because LeBron's my guy, but Giannis is the best player in the league right now. I mean, okay, he scores more than Kevin Durant. Now, I'm not saying he's as good a scorer as Kevin Durant. Those are two totally different things. He's a significantly better rebounder than Durant. I think he's a slightly better passer, although Durant's a really good passer. But he's a better defender than Durant, and he's durable. He's played 100 more games the last 3 years than Kevin Durant has. That means something. I mean, Tracy McGrady came out with a statement a couple of weeks ago and said, yeah, if he was playing in my day, he'd be a role player coming off the bench. I'm like, what? How many 6'11" dudes that are that athletic that play their ass off every night have we seen in the history of the league? Not many.
He'd be better almost in Tracy McGrady's era because they wouldn't care about 3-point shooting at all.
Right. Yeah, because he wouldn't even have to attempt those. I mean, he'd just be, a freight train down Hill to the basket like he is anyway. Like the disrespect for this guy is baffling to me. And again, I just think it's because he didn't come through the system.
He's so likable too. It's like
that's the other thing. He's re-signed with Milwaukee. The best of the guys are like, oh, that's so stupid. Durant's on his third team, LeBron's on his third team. Everybody's moving all over the place, and this guy's like, yeah, I'm comfortable here. Like he is. He's the most likable guy. It's almost like he's too good to be true.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this last week too when we were talking about the MVP race too. Sometimes when you win a couple, there becomes voter fatigue. Like LeBron, you could certainly you have made the case, I think, successfully that, he deserves more MVPs than he has, which, he's got 3, right?
4.
He's got 4.
He should have,
so maybe he should
have. Yeah. I mean, Jordan has 5. Kareem has 6. So yeah, I mean, I think he should have more. I mean,
when you've been the best player in the league for 18 years, it makes sense that you would win that many.
More than 4, yeah. And again, Durant only has 1, but how many times has Durant been the best player in the league? Like,
right,
never.
Kobe only has 1. Like, sometimes there's fatigue. You don't want to see the same guys. Like, but like, yeah, I honestly believe Giannis fully. Like, look at his team right now. They're surging. They're playing their best basketball. So that counts for something. And honestly, look at his players around him. We like Drew Holiday. We like Chris Middleton. Like, okay, but this is not a super team or anything like that. Nope. I know he's not dragging a crap team, but it's not like he's getting a huge amount of support from his cast. If take Giannis off that team, they're not I don't know that they're a playoff team without him.
No, they're probably in the play-in tournament, and they haven't had Brook Lopez for most of the year, right? He's just coming back now, and that's a big defensive guy for their system, right?
So that's the big thing that Embiid and Jokic have going for them too in terms of the narrative, because oftentimes it comes down to that as well. Embiid didn't have Ben Simmons for most of this year, and so he had to carry this team, and Jokic hasn't had Michael Porter or Jamal Murray this year, and he's had to carry the team. But there's been injuries on the Bucks too, and Giannis has just quietly gone about his work and wins games and has a better record than those two teams.
Yeah, and again, he may lead the league in scoring. Like, that's pretty important. And then throw in 12 rebounds and 6 assists, and he puts up on a consistent basis numbers that are slightly better than Karl Malone's were, right? But he's a better defender, and I think a better leader. So you put
slightly
all that
more likable.
Very much more likable. Absolutely. I mean, and Malone won 2 MVPs. One came after Jordan left the league, and one was Jordan's final year in Chicago. And that kind of got Jordan pissed off, and may have been Jordan didn't really need any kind of reason to get pissed off, but that, fueled him to beat Malone in the finals. Look, if Jokic wins it, it'd be somewhat like Steve Nash winning back-to-back MVPs. You look back 10 years later and go, how'd that happen? Although I thought Jokic deserved it last year because he was more durable than Embiid. Embiid missed a lot of games.
He's been more durable than the other two guys this year too. To his credit, he's played 70 games. Yeah. Embiid and Giannis have played 63. 63 is fine. Right. But Jokic, doesn't get hurt, which is wild.
Yeah, he and Luka, they're so like, they just look like 2 old guys playing at the Y. Like they're never gonna. I mean, Luka, I know, had some sort of hamstring issue a few weeks back when they played the Celtics, and he showed up out of shape, right?
Yes.
I mean, he was probably 280 pounds when training camp started. Jokic, I don't even know what kind of shape he's in. He just looks like a guy. Like he just looks like your neighbor who tends to be a foot taller than the average man. But yeah, I mean, he's very durable. I had the 3 of those guys to be should finish 1, 2, 3, and I think after that, Luka, Jason Tatum, and Devin Booker are probably the next 3 guys, because Ja Morant, although we put him up there a couple months ago, they're 19-2 in 21 games he's missed. So
he's missed too many games.
Mm-hmm.
Last thing I want to say, Sap, about Giannis before we move on to our last topic. His team and himself play best in these big games, it seems like.
Yes.
Which that's the mark of a true, not star, superstar. When you have the biggest games, you win and you play and you ball out. You play fantastic. And he's had 2 in the past week. We said 2 marquee games, 2 humongous games against Brooklyn and against Philadelphia. One of them both was the best player on the court in both of those games. So I don't know what more you want from the guy.
Yeah, it was weird. I mean, he won the back-to-back MVPs, and they kind of underachieved in the postseason. And people are like, "Well, this guy's great in the regular season, doesn't translate to the postseason." And then last year happened. I mean, he scored 50 in the game six clinching win over Phoenix. He was 17 of 19 from the free throw line, which was his Achilles heel, and now he's up to 73% this year. I don't know. I don't know what more people want from the guy. Yeah, I mean, those are statement games. There's a chance they're the 1 seed. So they'd have home court throughout the playoffs until they get to the finals. And, if they have a rematch against Phoenix or even Memphis, those teams would have home court advantage. But I don't know why it's not a 3-horse race. It seems like it's Jokic and Embiid with Giannis as like an afterthought. And I'm like, the guy has outperformed everybody. Like, I don't know what more he can do.
Yeah. So, all right, last topic of the day. Giannis is obviously going to be a Hall of Famer when his career is over, but the current crop of Hall of Fame just got announced. Sap, not the most star-studded class, but
right.
One guy I would have certainly put in, and that's the headliner is Manu Ginobili. The other person for other NBA guy who gets in is Tim Hardaway. Swin Cash, one of the greatest female basketball players of all time. She gets in. George Karl, former coach of a lot of teams, guy who is won a lot of games, not necessarily the most popular coach. I know he's had issues with a lot of players, but he gets in. And Bob Huggins, who's coached in college for a very, very long time and been outstanding, he also gets in. Sap, what do you think of this class?
Well, Ginobili, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame because he was a big part of 4 championship teams, right? And he was a multiple-time All-Star. He was just such a great clutch player. And then again, you bring in the international flavor as well, so he belongs in there. There's no
and the
question.
gold medal.
And the gold medal this year in 2004.
That right.
That was massive. So I have no problem with him. Hardaway, I put Hardaway in the same thing. I keep rooting for my guy Marcus Johnson to get in, but he's probably 100 to 150 games short. He had only 691 games in his career, so I think he got to be around 800 to really qualify. That's like 10 full seasons. Although Bill Walton's less than that, but Bill Walton was such an impactful player, especially in college, that he belongs in the Hall of Fame. Hardaway, I thought he was going to get a little backlash because he had some homophobic statements a few years ago, but that didn't seem to really factor in. And I think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. Everybody seems to make it. So, you look at that Golden State team, you have Mitch Richmond, Tim Hardaway, and Chris Mullin all in the Hall of Fame, and they didn't even make it to a finals, but that's the NBA. That's the basketball Hall of Fame.
I hate the Hall of Fame now in terms of just let everybody in. I think Ginobili, to me, that makes sense because of, what he accomplished in terms of winning. He was just, I think every season he played, he played from San Antonio from 02-03 to 17-18. Every season they won more than 50 games. So, that counts for something. Obviously, Tim Duncan was there, which helps. But, he impacted winning, was one of the greatest, I'd say, 6 men ever to play in the NBA. Obviously, we know what he did internationally. He had massive games in the playoffs and in the finals. His stats certainly don't pop out at you where you go, oh, wow, holy crap. He averaged 13 points a game for his career. But if you watch him in the big games and obviously the 4 titles, the gold medal, it's the sum of his career. So if you look at the whole story, I say, yeah, absolutely, he should get in. Tim Hardaway, I wouldn't have put in. He's 17 points a game for his career, 17.7, 3 rebounds, 8 assists. I think he's top 15 all time in assists, I believe, which is, obviously pretty good. He didn't shoot as high of a percentage from 3 as I thought. I think of Tim Hardaway as this 3-point gunner. And I guess in that era that he played in, shooting 35% from 3 was really, really good based on the volume. But that's his career 3-point percentage, Sap, 35, which is around where Marcus Smart's is.
Yeah, it's nothing great. And again, the 3-point shot was not as prevalent back then as it is now. If you've got Basketball Reference open, do a comparison of Tim Hardaway and Kevin Johnson. And Kevin Johnson never gets any love to potentially be in the Hall of Fame. He was a lightning quick point guard. Originally drafted by Cleveland, traded to Phoenix. He he was probably end to end as fast as any point guard I've ever seen. But I don't think his numbers are that far behind Tim Hardaway's.
Kevin Johnson averaged 0.2 more points per game than him. Averaged more assists per game than him. That's the same rebounds, and shot worse from three, but 17.9 points per game, 1.5 steals, 9 assists, 3.3 rebounds per game. Tim Hardaway's 17.7 points, 8.2 assists, so an assist fewer, 1.6. They have basically identical stats. Total games played for Tim Hardaway, 867. Total games played for Kevin Johnson, 623. That's regular season.
That's the thing. I think. Yeah. See, that's the problem. Same thing with Kevin Johnson, Marcus Johnson. If you don't get to 800 games, you'd better be like Kawhi Leonard doesn't have 800 games yet, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but he's got 2 Finals MVPs,
right?
Defensive Player of the Year. Bill Walton's all-time great, and then you throw in college as well. So yeah, if Kevin Johnson had played a couple more years, he would have got in just like Tim Hardaway. But as far as George Karl, I mean, he accumulated a ton of wins, didn't win a championship, but was a good coach. And as far as Bob Huggins, I mean, he didn't even win a national championship, which just goes back to me saying and you agreeing that it seems like everybody gets into the Basketball Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think we did a segment on when we were doing Herald Radio years back about me restructuring the Basketball Hall of Fame, and I think I cut about 50% of the people in there. It's too easy. It's too easy.
Yeah.
Okay, Sap,
again,
if you on the surface, okay, like you just said, that Golden State Warriors team had 3 Hall of Famers on it. So you would think, a team had 3 Hall of Famers on it. How many championships did they win?
Yeah.
Did they even make the conference finals?
Oh, I think maybe once. But again, they were playing. Things started to change. Let's see, the late 80s, early 90s. So the Lakers were still potent. And then the early 90s, you kind of had a different representative. West. Yeah, Rockets. You had a little bit of
Utah
there in the later 90s. Yeah, it was almost
Seattle.
Like every year the team Seattle was in there. So you had all these different
those
teams. Portland
teams
had some nice.
Utah, 2 Hall of Famers. Seattle, 1.
2 Hall of Famers, yeah.
Houston, 1.
Just Elijah 1. Yeah.
And you had 3.
And you had 3 in Golden State. They played at a very fast pace. So their numbers may have been inflated. It's almost like putting baseball players that played in Colorado in the Hall of Fame, because Golden State played at an incredible pace back then. They were a fun team to watch. I mean,
but to baseball's credit, Sap, they don't do that. They don't put the Colorado Rockies in the Hall of Fame typically.
Yeah, hopefully not. I mean, they did put Larry Walker in, but he had some good stats outside of Colorado. They didn't
put Todd Helton in.
No, Todd Helton's not in. Yeah. Andres Galarraga, who put up huge numbers in Colorado. Right. So again, it's the era, the style of play. I mean, if you're a running gun team and you have 110 possessions a game, I'm just throwing a number out there. Of course, you're going to have more points, rebounds, and assists. You're just playing at a much faster pace than other teams. Like I said, they were a blast to watch, but I don't know if they, I think Mullen was the best player out of those 3. He made the dream team. Mitch Richmond was good, as was Tim Hardaway, but I don't necessarily think of them as Hall of Famers.
No, and I think the Basketball Hall of Fame is so allergic to saying we're gonna have just a really small class this year. Put in 1 guy or put in no people. Like there's nothing wrong with that. That's that's the problem. You can't go into every year and saying we must fill a quota of X amount of players that go in. Like then it's not the Hall of Fame. That's not special. So I'm okay with Ginobili, not okay with Tim Hardaway. The coaches, whatever. And Swin Cash is a no-brainer. I'd say she's top 5 WNBA player of all time. So that was an obvious one.
Absolutely.
Not a star-studded class by any means. But I'm sure Skip Bayless will be there because Ginobili to him is a top 5 all-time player.
Absolutely, yeah. That's one of his top 5 at
least. Yeah, right. Doesn't he have Ginobili ranked above LeBron?
Probably. Yeah, I mean, he's got a lot of guys ahead of LeBron, which is good luck. But no, Ginobili belongs. Yeah, he was a sensational player.
All right, Sap. Well, that's gonna do it for us for this edition of the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. If you want to find the show, just type that in, and you can find it anywhere podcasts are found. We are presented by Full Press Coverage. And you can find the YouTube version of the show at youtube.com/JetsDryer. If you want to see our social medias, where Sap runs great polls every week. And, it's not just limited to basketball. We'll also talk about, on social media, our reaction to Will Smith's slap. I'm sure Sap had some strong thoughts about that. Actually, I did a whole podcast, Sap, with our friend Mike Molino about it. We did an hour and a half on Will Smith's slap. I was on his show, which was very nice. Shout out to Double M Media, to Mike and Marv, who do a great show there. Yep. But yeah, we did an hour and a half about the slap. So check out at John Sap 25 at JetsDryer, and get all sorts of great information there off our social media. And we'll be back next week with some new editions of the podcast as the playoffs are really, really close. So there's tons of stuff to talk about, especially in the Eastern Conference, where we have no freaking clue what the standings are going to look like this time next week. But we will get you covered on all the latest stuff and get you ready for the playoffs. And we will be doing multiple shows throughout the playoffs, just like we did last year. So make sure you stay tuned for all of that. And we will talk to you later, everybody. See ya.